I never imagined a piece of paper could hold so much power. Not until it turned my $5 million lottery win into the sharpest weapon I had against the woman who thought she owned me. I'm sitting here now, in what used to be our shared home, and the silence in these rooms is deafening. 3 years ago, I thought I was building a life. Now, I'm just picking up the pieces, finally ready to tell you how it all unraveled. My name is David, and at 34, I'm finally ready to talk about this. Maybe it'll help someone, or maybe it's just for me. Either way, it needs to get out. I met Sarah Miller at a friend's barbecue in the summer of 2019. She was 29, gorgeous in that easy way that would stop you mid-sentence, and worked at a big law firm downtown. Her dad, Robert, had built a huge chain of dental practices. Her mom, Karen, came from old money, generations back. Sarah grew up with summer homes and trust funds as normal conversation. Me? I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with my mom, Carol, and my younger brother, Michael. Dad left when I was 7. Mom worked double shifts as a nurse just to keep food on the table. We didn't have much, but she made sure we had enough. She taught me hard work and integrity mattered more than a bank balance. I still believe that. When Sarah and I started dating, I was an electrician, honest work, decent pay. I loved solving problems with my hands. Sarah seemed charmed by what she called my authenticity. Looking back, I think she saw me as a project, someone she could shape. But back then, I was just flattered that someone like her would want anything to do with someone like me. Things moved fast. 6 months in, we were talking about moving in. By our first anniversary, I was saving every extra dollar from overtime, ring shopping. I found a modest diamond. It cost me 3 months' savings. Not the 2-carat princess cut Sarah had casually mentioned wanting, but I thought the gesture was what counted. She said yes. For a moment, I truly believed we were building something beautiful. The engagement, though, showed cracks I kept telling myself were just growing pains. Sarah's mom, Karen, micromanaged every single wedding decision with military precision. The venue had to reflect their standing. The guest list was carefully curated, the right people in, anyone lowering the tone out. Catering, flowers, music, photography, everything needed the Miller Family Council's stamp of approval. My suggestions? Tolerated, at best. When I brought up having my Uncle Frank's barbecue ribs at the reception, Karen looked at me like I'd suggested serving roadkill on their finest china. She explained, with such exaggerated patience, that the Millers had their own caterers, and straying would send the wrong message. I never did figure out what message ribs would send, but I stopped offering ideas after that. My mom, Carol, tried to help, offering to handle the rehearsal dinner. Tradition, after all, said that was the groom's family's role. Karen cut her off, surgically. She'd already booked the country club, Carol shouldn't worry herself about the details. The condescension was thick, like syrup. My mother, who raised 2 boys alone while working 12-hour nursing shifts, was being dismissed like some clueless hired help. I confronted Sarah about her mom's behavior one night, after Karen actually questioned if my family even knew which fork to use. Sarah sighed, like I was just so tiring with my trivial concerns. She said her mom meant well, that she just wanted everything to be perfect. She suggested I was oversensitive, seeing slights that weren't really there. That conversation set the pattern for our whole marriage. Anytime I brought up how her family treated me, Sarah would minimize, deflect, or blame my insecurities. I wasn't being mistreated, I was paranoid. Her parents weren't looking down on me, I was looking too hard for reasons to feel inferior. The problem was never their behavior. It was always my perception. My brother, Michael, pulled me aside at my bachelor party, a modest get-together he'd organized at a local bar. The elaborate weekend in New Orleans Sarah's friends suggested? That was way beyond what my actual friends could afford. Michael looked at me, serious. "Are you sure about this, David?" he asked. He said he'd seen me shrinking these last few months, like I was trying to take up less space, not to inconvenience anyone. "That's not you," he said. "What's happening?" I mumbled something about weddings being stressful, that things would settle down after we were married. He didn't believe me. Honestly, I'm not sure I believed myself. The prenup conversation came 2 months before the wedding. We were in her parents' living room, surrounded by furniture worth more than my annual salary. Robert cleared his throat. "An important matter to discuss." Karen, with a smile that felt rehearsed, handed me a manila folder. Inside? A 23-page prenuptial agreement. It was drafted by the Miller family attorney, Jonathan Reed, a specialist in protecting generational wealth from gold diggers. The bitter irony of that wouldn't hit me until much, much later. I read it alone that night in my apartment, highlighting parts that made my stomach churn. It was a document born of complete distrust. Any inheritance Sarah received? Hers. Any growth on her existing assets? Hers. Future earnings from her legal career? Hers. The house her parents planned to gift us? Hers. Even a car she might buy during our marriage? Hers. But the clause that really stood out was on page 17. Tucked between retirement accounts and intellectual property, it said, in unambiguous legal language, any windfall, inheritance, lottery winnings, gambling proceeds, contest prizes, or unexpected financial gains received by either party during the marriage would remain the sole and separate property of the party who received it, with no claim by the other spouse, regardless of the circumstances of acquisition. I read that paragraph 3 times. I wanted to be sure. Sarah wanted to guarantee that if she ever won or inherited anything, I wouldn't see a single cent. Yes, the language applied to both of us, making it mutual. But the intention was obvious. This was her bulletproof vest. Against me. Michael came over the next evening, and I showed him. He read it, slowly, his face going from curious to disbelief to pure anger. "You're actually going to sign this, David?" he asked. "It reads like she expects you to steal her silverware the moment she looks away." I told him I loved her. That marriage wasn't about money. If a piece of paper made her feel secure, then what did it matter? We weren't getting married for financial reasons. Michael just shook his head. "You're making a mistake," he said. "If someone needs a legal document to protect themselves from you before you've even exchanged vows, they're not marrying you for the right reasons." He warned me I'd regret it. I signed it anyway. The night before I put my name on that document, I sat alone, letting the full weight of it sink in. The terms weren't just unfair, they were a declaration of my expendability. If it all went south, Sarah would walk away completely untouched. I'd walk away with whatever I'd scraped together on my own, which, at that point, wasn't much. But I convinced myself signing was an act of faith. This prenup would never matter, I thought, because we'd never divorce. I believed by accepting these terms without complaint, I was proving my commitment. Sarah would see I loved her, not her money, and that would be our foundation. Looking back, I get it now. I was trying to buy her trust with my vulnerability. I thought if I gave up enough, sacrificed enough, accepted enough unfair treatment, she'd finally recognize my worth. And treat me accordingly. It's a bargain that never works, but desperate people make it all the time. At the ceremony, surrounded by Sarah's impressive guest list and my small collection of family and friends, I truly believed we'd prove everyone wrong. Mom, Carol, sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes, looking proud despite her reservations. Michael, my best man, gave a toast carefully worded to avoid any mention of that legal document. The first year of marriage just confirmed what the prenup had already hinted at. Sarah's view of our partnership was transactional, in ways I hadn't fully grasped. She managed the finances, which meant she controlled where our money went. Her salary funded her retirement, her clothes, her savings. My salary covered the mortgage on the house her parents gifted her, the utilities, groceries, and maintenance for both our cars. When I suggested a joint savings account, she laughed, like I'd told a joke. She said the prenup meant separate finances, and mixing things would complicate audits. That word, audit, it stuck with me. She wasn't planning for our future. She was preparing for its potential dissolution. Her parents visited constantly. Those visits became tests of endurance. Robert would question my career path, asking when I'd move into something more professional than manual labor. The fact I owned my own business, employed people, built something from nothing? That just didn't register as achievement for him. Karen would inspect the house, barely concealing her disappointment, noting rooms needing updating, wondering aloud if I was contributing enough to maintain the property. Sarah never defended me. She'd sit quietly, sometimes a tight smile, as if my discomfort was a fair price for her parents' approval. Sometimes she'd even join in, suggesting I get additional certifications or mentioning how her colleagues' husbands had transitioned from trade work to management. The united front I'd envisioned with my wife was purely in my head. In reality, I stood alone against a family that never, ever saw me as an equal. So, I buried myself in work. Extra projects, certifications, eventually starting my own small electrical contracting business. Not glamorous, but it was mine. Sarah seemed supportive, on the surface, but her encouragement always had this undercurrent of condescension. She'd tell her friends about my little company with the same tone you'd use for a child's lemonade stand. My mom, Carol, noticed the change in me at our monthly dinners. She said I looked tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. Like I was carrying a weight I hadn't chosen. When she asked if I was happy, I gave her the rehearsed answer, marriage is work, Mom. We're figuring it out. She didn't push, but the worry never left her eyes. There were moments I almost convinced myself things were getting better. Sarah could be charming when things aligned with her expectations. She'd surprise me with baseball tickets or suggest a new restaurant. During those brief windows of warmth, I'd remember why I fell for her, her intelligence, confidence, the way she owned a room. I'd think maybe I was too harsh, that every marriage had adjustments. Then, just as quickly, the shift. The coldness. A comment about my clothes before her work event. An exasperated sigh when I asked about weekend plans. That specific tone, reserved for when I'd failed some unspoken expectation. I learned to navigate it, adjusting my behavior, trying to become smaller, to avoid collision. The second year brought a new level of dysfunction. Sarah started talking about children, more and more, always framing it around timelines and logistics, never desire or love. 2 children, before 35. She'd already researched private schools. Kids, to her, were accomplishments, checklist items proving her successful transition to motherhood. I wanted children, but her clinical approach bothered me. When I tried talking about the kind of parents we'd be, values, experiences we'd create, she'd pivot to practicals, square footage for a family home, childcare costs, parental leave. The emotional side of parenthood seemed irrelevant to her planning. We argued about it once, a rare time I pushed back. I asked her, do you actually want to be a mother, or do you just want to have children because everyone in your social circle does? Her response was cutting. She said not everyone approached big decisions with reckless emotion, and some understood the value of planning. She asked what I had ever planned successfully. The question hung between us, thick like smoke from a fire neither of us would acknowledge. I started sleeping in the guest room sometimes. Not every night, but enough that it became normal. Sarah never commented. And that told me everything about how she valued my presence. The lottery ticket was an impulse. Cold Tuesday in November, 3 years into our marriage. I stopped at a gas station after a job site. The jackpot sign glowed, astronomical numbers I never seriously considered. I bought a quick pick with my coffee, shoved it in my jacket, forgot it. 3 days later, I found it doing laundry. The drawing was last night. I pulled up numbers on my phone, more boredom than hope. My hands started shaking by the 3rd number. By the 6th, I was on the laundry room floor, convinced I was hallucinating. I drove to the lottery commission the next morning, still in shock. Watched them verify it. The official looked at me with that practiced calm, like he'd done this a million times. He confirmed it, $5 million jackpot. About $3.2 million after taxes, if I took the lump sum. He asked if I needed a moment. My first call was to my mom, Carol. She cried. My second was to Michael. He laughed, then cried. My third call went to my accountant, Daniel Harris, who managed my business finances. He told me, "Don't do anything until we meet." He stressed anything with unusual intensity. I didn't call Sarah. I'm still not sure why. Maybe some part of me already knew where this was going. Or maybe I just wanted one moment, just one, where something good was entirely mine, before our marriage's machinery turned it into another asset for her to manage. I sat in my truck in that parking lot for almost an hour, staring at the verified receipt. $3.2 million after taxes. The number felt abstract, unreal. I thought about my mom, counting coupons at the kitchen table. Michael, working 2 jobs in college. Every overtime shift I'd worked, every luxury I'd denied myself. And then I thought about Sarah, who'd never denied herself anything, never worried about money, never known what it felt like to check a bank balance before buying groceries. I thought about the prenup, 23 pages of legal protection she'd insisted on, to guard against someone like me taking advantage of someone like her. The irony was almost too perfect to process. She found out that evening. I came home with champagne that cost more than my monthly groceries. I told her. Showed her the ticket. Waited for her reaction. What I got was a performance. She screamed. Jumped. Wrapped her arms around me like I was the most important person on earth. Then, almost immediately, the questions started. When could we access the money? Had I filed the claim? How long for the transfer? She mentioned we should talk to her father's financial advisor. He'd know how to invest this properly. I watched her eyes calculate. Watched her mentally spend money that wasn't hers. Something cold settled in my chest. Over the next few weeks, Sarah transformed into a version I'd only ever glimpsed. She started browsing real estate in neighborhoods I couldn't pronounce. Left jewelry catalogs open on the counter, items circled in red. Casually mentioned her law school friend just redid her kitchen with Italian marble. Wouldn't that be nice? The spending suggestions escalated. A new car, her current one was 3 years old. A vacation home, everyone needs somewhere to escape. An investment in her father's new dental practice expansion, because family should support family. Every single conversation circled back to the money. My money. And how we should be using it. I visited Daniel Harris, my accountant, alone. I brought the prenup. He read it carefully, pausing at page 17, just like I had. When he finished, he looked at me, an unreadable expression on his face. He said I should get a family law attorney, but in his opinion, the language was crystal clear. The windfall clause was mutual, comprehensive, covering exactly this scenario. Lottery winnings acquired during the marriage by one party remained sole and separate property of that party. No community property claim, no spousal entitlement, nothing. He said she'd effectively written herself out of any share of this money long before I ever bought the ticket. I hired an attorney, Jessica Evans, for an independent review. She confirmed it all. The document was ironclad. Sarah, or more accurately, her family's lawyer, had been so meticulous protecting her assets, they'd inadvertently protected mine too. The windfall clause made no distinction about who they expected to win. It simply said, whoever received it, kept it. Sarah cornered me in the kitchen that Sunday. Her patience, clearly, was gone. She demanded to know when we were making decisions about our money. She'd been patient, she understood I needed time, but this was a partnership, and she had a right to be involved. I asked her to sit down. I pulled the prenup from my filing cabinet, the same one I'd signed 3 years earlier against Michael's advice. I opened it to page 17, slid it across the table. I pointed to the clause. "Recognize this section?" She glanced at it, that dismissive familiarity of someone who'd helped draft every word. "Of course," she said. "The windfall protection clause. Standard in prenups like this." "Why are you showing me?" I told her to read it again. Carefully. Pay attention to the language. I watched understanding dawn on her face, like a slow, terrible sunrise, revealing a landscape she'd never truly seen. The clause was mutual. It applied to both parties. Any windfall received by either spouse remained solely theirs. She started shaking her head before she even finished reading. This wasn't what it meant, she insisted. It was designed to protect her inheritance, her winnings, her assets. It wasn't supposed to apply to me. "Why not?" I asked. "I'm a party to this agreement, same as you." I signed it. Agreed to its terms. Accepted its conditions. If you won $5 million tomorrow, I wouldn't get a cent. Why would the reverse be any different? Her father's call came within the hour. Robert Miller's voice, controlled fury. He wasn't used to plans backfiring. He accused me of manipulating his daughter. Threatened legal action. Lawyers, courts, making my life very difficult if I didn't do the right thing. I let him finish. Then I told him, "The document your attorney drafted, the one your family insisted I sign, the prenup meant to protect Sarah from someone like me? That document currently protects me from people like you." I suggested he talk to Jonathan Reed, since I was sure he remembered drafting page 17. Robert sputtered about lawyers and courts, how I'd regret this. I hung up. Nothing he could say would change the legal reality. I'd spent 3 years listening to the Miller family's opinions on my inadequacy. I didn't need to hear any more. Sarah's behavior in the following days shifted with almost algorithmic precision. First, seduction. Lingerie I'd never seen her wear. Suggestions of a romantic trip to reconnect. When that failed, emotional manipulation. Crying about how the money was destroying our relationship, begging me to remember what we'd built. I pointed out what we'd built amounted to a prenup that protected her from me. Her tears dried remarkably fast. Then came the guilt. All the support her family had given over the years. The house. Connections that helped my business grow. Social opportunities from being a Miller by marriage. She painted me as ungrateful, a betrayal. When I asked her to specify what her family had done for me that didn't benefit them more, she had no convincing answer. Her final strategy was the most telling. She threatened to destroy my reputation in the community if I didn't agree to a settlement. She knew people. Her family had influence. They could make things very difficult for a small electrical contractor dependent on referrals. The woman I married, the woman I believed loved me, stood in our kitchen and threatened to ruin my livelihood if I didn't hand over money that was legally mine. That conversation ended whatever lingering attachment I still felt. You can recover from disappointment. You can process betrayal. But watching someone you thought you knew reveal themselves willing to harm you for profit? That leaves a different kind of scar. The meeting with Sarah's attorney happened 2 weeks later. Jonathan Reed sat across from me in his wood-paneled office, face neutral, as Jessica Evans laid out our position. Sarah sat beside him, rigid, her eyes avoiding mine. Jessica was methodical. She walked through the prenup, clause by clause, showing how completely the Miller family had protected their assets. She highlighted the windfall provision, explained its mutual application, cited case law. She concluded, no legal basis for any claim on the lottery winnings. Jonathan listened, silent. When Jessica finished, he turned to Sarah. He said something I'll remember forever. He told her the clause was clear. There was nothing he could do. She had specifically requested language to protect unexpected financial gains from spousal claims. She wanted ironclad protection, he admitted, and she got it. He conceded that, unfortunately, it protected me just as thoroughly as it would have protected her. Sarah finally looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time since this whole thing started. "Are you really going to do this?" she asked. "Seriously use my own prenup against me?" I told her I wasn't using anything against her. I was simply honoring the agreement she insisted we sign. She wanted separate finances, protected assets, legal boundaries around our money. I was giving her exactly what she asked for. The divorce proceedings started next month. Sarah cited irreconcilable differences, which, I guess, was technically accurate. Our ideas about marriage, partnership, and basic human decency had proven fundamentally incompatible. She tried every angle to claim a portion of the winnings. Argued the ticket was marital funds because I used cash from our shared household. Her own prenup, of course, defined our finances as separate, obliterating that argument. Claimed winnings should be income, subject to different provisions. The document specifically listed lottery winnings as distinct from earned income. She even suggested the clause was unconscionable and should be voided. The court noted she had independent legal counsel, fully understood the terms, and had even helped draft the language herself. Every argument failed. Every strategy collapsed under the weight of her own meticulous planning. The court proceedings were surprisingly brief. Judge Evelyn Hayes reviewed the prenup with the methodical patience of someone who'd seen endless couples fight over money. She asked Jonathan Reed to confirm his client had independent legal representation during drafting. He confirmed. Had terms been fully explained? Confirmed. Any coercion? Sarah's own attorney had to admit, no. If anything, the pressure had gone the other way. Sarah made one last attempt to sway things, taking the stand to testify about our relationship. She described herself as a devoted wife, supporting my career, opening social doors, providing a stable home for 3 years. She painted me as a deceiver, hiding my true character until I had resources. When Jessica, my attorney, cross-examined her, that narrative unraveled. Jessica asked Sarah to explain the prenup's windfall clause. Sarah described how it protected her potential inheritance, prizes, unexpected gains. Then Jessica asked why that protection shouldn't apply equally to both parties, since the language specified either spouse. Sarah had no coherent answer. She kept insisting it was meant to protect her, that anyone reading it would understand the intent, that the spirit of the agreement mattered more than the wording. Judge Hayes interrupted, noting courts interpret contracts by their actual language, not one party's retroactive understanding of intent. She observed the prenup was unusually thorough, clearly drafted by competent counsel. She concluded the terms were unambiguous and would be enforced as written. The final divorce decree awarded her exactly what the prenup specified, everything she brought into the marriage, and nothing I'd gained. She kept the house her parents gifted her. Her retirement accounts. Her precious separate assets. And I kept my $5 million jackpot, minus about $47,000 in legal fees. My mom's reaction when I told her the outcome has stayed with me. She said she was proud of me. Not because of the money. She said she was proud because I never compromised who I was, even when it would have been easier to become someone else. Sarah spent 3 years trying to make me feel small, and I just kept being myself. Michael helped me move into my new place, a modest house I bought outright in a quiet neighborhood. He pointed out I could afford much bigger. Asked why this one. I told him it reminded me of the apartment we grew up in. It felt like home. I gave my mom, Carol, $200,000. Enough to pay off her mortgage and fund a comfortable retirement. She argued at first, "I don't need it, David, save it for your future." I reminded her of all those double shifts, all those sacrifices, all those years she put Michael and me before herself. This isn't charity, Mom, I told her. This is interest on a debt I can never truly repay. Michael got enough to pay off his student loans and start college funds for his twin daughters. He tried to refuse, just like Mom, but I told him, that's what brothers do. I put most of the remaining money into conservative investments, keeping enough liquid to expand my business, hire 2 more electricians. The company has grown steadily since then. Not because of the lottery money, but because I never stopped doing the work I love. Sarah reached out once, about 6 months after the divorce. A long email. She'd had time to reflect. She understood how her behavior had been shaped by her upbringing. She wanted me to know she was working on herself. She didn't ask for money directly, but the implication was thick between the apologies and justifications. I didn't respond. Some doors are better left closed. Her father, Robert, tried a different approach. Reached out through an acquaintance, proposing a business investment. The desperation was transparent. The dental practice expansion he'd mentioned before, now framed as an opportunity, not an obligation. I politely declined and blocked his number. Last I heard, Sarah had left the law firm and was working at her father's company in some administrative role. The family's finances weren't as stable as they'd always seemed. The dental practice chain had struggled for years, propped up by Karen's family money and Robert's creative accounting. Losing what they clearly expected to be my $5 million contribution had accelerated their decline. I try not to take satisfaction in their struggles. They're flawed, misguided, but human. Still, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a small, wounded part of me, remembering every condescending comment and dismissive glance, that felt a certain justice in how things turned out. What I learned goes beyond just prenups and legal protection. I learned people will show you who they are, if you just pay attention. Sarah told me exactly what she thought of me when she handed me that 23-page document. I wasn't trustworthy. I was a risk to be managed. Love came with conditions, protections, escape clauses. I should have listened. Instead, I convinced myself that signing her terms was an act of love, proof I didn't care about money, security, or fair treatment. I confused self-sacrifice with devotion. I thought giving up my rights would prove my worth. It didn't. It just made me easier to control. For anyone facing a similar situation, here's the advice my brother gave me, that I was too stubborn to hear. If someone needs a legal fortress to protect themselves from you before you've even built a life together, they're not planning a partnership. They're planning an occupation. They are telling you, in documented and notarized detail, that they expect you to be the enemy eventually. Believe them. I'm dating again, cautiously. I met Emily through a contractors networking event. She runs her own painting company. She knows about the lottery money. Her first reaction? A joke about me needing better work boots because mine are falling apart. She treats me like a person, not a portfolio. It's remarkable how refreshing basic decency feels after 3 years of being treated like a liability. My business is thriving. My family is happy. I have enough money to live comfortably, never worrying about rent or health care. By any measure, I'm in a better position than I ever imagined. Yet sometimes, late at night, I think about the man who signed that prenup 3 years ago. His hope. His naivety. His desperate desire to prove love could overcome anything. I want to tell him he wasn't wrong to believe in love. His only mistake was believing in someone who didn't deserve it. The prenup Sarah demanded wasn't just about protecting her assets. It was about establishing a hierarchy in our marriage before it even began. She would always be the one with resources, options, power. I would always be the one grateful for her attention, dependent on her approval, trapped by her generosity. The lottery changed everything. It shattered the balance she'd so carefully constructed. Suddenly, I had something she wanted. Suddenly, I had leverage. And suddenly, her true feelings about our partnership became impossible to hide. She didn't love me. She loved the idea of me, the working-class husband she could display like a trophy, proof of her open-mindedness, her willingness to look past my socioeconomic background. I was a character in her narrative, not a person with my own story. When I won that money, I stopped fitting the role she'd cast me in. And that's when she realized she'd built the very trap she'd eventually fall into. I don't know what Sarah tells people about our divorce. If she admits her own prenup backfired spectacularly, or if she's concocted some story about how I deceived her. It doesn't matter. The court records exist. The document exists. The truth exists, no matter what story she tells. As for me, I'm just grateful. Grateful for a mother who taught me character matters more than circumstances. Grateful for a brother who tried to warn me, even when I wouldn't listen. Grateful for a random impulse at a gas station that changed my entire life's trajectory. And yes, I'm grateful for page 17 of a prenuptial agreement drafted by Jonathan Reed, Esquire, whose meticulous attention to protecting the Miller family fortune inadvertently created the legal framework for my independence. The windfall clause was supposed to protect her from me. Instead, it protected me from her. I never thought I'd thank my ex-wife for anything. But I'll give credit where it's due. That prenup was the best thing she ever gave me. She just didn't know it at the time. None of us did. Looking back, knowing what I know now, what would you have done?